So regional engagement. This is the team that we're going to drill down into because you work with us on a daily, weekly basis. Regional engagement aims to advance Emory's mission by strengthening alumni communities around the globe through service, learning, and shared affiliations. Our objectives are to connect alumni to each other, but also back to Emory, produce consistent communications and experiences so that we can acquire new alumni engagement as well as deepen relationships. We cultivate our alumni leaders, such as you all, to make sure that we're strengthening local communities and building the volunteer pipeline at Emory. And then we're promoting opportunities for alumni to invest their time and treasure back to Emory. So board members are constantly asking me why we do what we do and also how we measure success. So that's why we want to be, again, very clear about this up front. Jen discussed the top line goals that are always at the forefront of what we do, but breaking it down for you to understand what the regional engagement officers on my team are held accountable for and measured on every year. And I did fail to mention that we have regional engagement officers, for those of you who don't know, spread across the US so that they are actually living in their territories, better able to represent and get to know and activate communities around the US. So regional engagement officers, we're looking at how many activities they're producing within their territory, the number of boards they have and board members within a territory. We can break out their year-over-year engagement numbers within a geographic region. And we can break that out by mode of engagement, which I'll talk about in a moment. And then we're looking at the local support for signature Emory initiatives, like the Alumni Admission Network that Jen mentioned. Did we see a dip in the number of Boston alumni who participated in that program from last year to this year? And then, of course, we have operational and administrative goals that we are holding ourselves accountable on. So engagement, we throw that term around a lot, and I know that many people still are unsure about what that means. And I have to remind myself, not everyone uses that word in the same way. So when we talk about engagement, this is what we mean. On the left-hand side of my screen, you will see that Emory follows engagement tracking that is set by the Council for Advancement and Support of Education. That is a national or global association, really, that sets the standard for most universities to follow. And we use this to track what we consider meaningful interactions with the institution. And again, those definitions are set by case, so we're not making these up on our own. So we track anything that we consider to be a meaningful interaction with the institution, and then we're further classifying it into these 4 different levels of the pyramid so that we can understand the type of those 50,000 that Josh would like to see us engage, which we have. How are they interacting with us? We have our communication bucket at the bottom of the pyramid because it is the most passive. Those are things like clicking on an email or registering for an event, but not attending. Experiential, which is attending an event, but also many other types of activity. But most notably, it's participating in an event or meeting with a staff member. There's volunteering, which again could be submitting an award nomination for an alum who you feel is worthy of that distinction, or it could be serving on a board. And then there's philanthropy, which again, gifts of all size count in that area. We drill down, this is not CASE, but this is Emory. The regional engagement team is drilling into that volunteer category and keeping an eye on the entire volunteer ecosystem. Do we have one-off volunteers who are stepping up to serve on host committees or leading an Emory Cares service project? They want time-bound commitments, not the very intense board service, and that's fine. We need plenty of those volunteers. Then we have that next level. We call them our influencers, our connectors. These are very important people who help open doors for us in the regions and can be very helpful to the networks as well. And then we, of course, have our very special few who are able to invest their time and passion into serving on a board or committee. So Emory networks, like I said at the top, play a huge role in achieving our success. So I don't need to go through this, but I will include this slide as a reference in case you all need to know what the definition is of an Emory network. The most important thing to note is that Emory networks come in all shapes and sizes. The majority of our we have 44 US networks, and Jenny, I need to calculate how many international groups we currently have. So the majority of our networks are still regionally based, but we do have networks based around identity, industry, and other affiliations. They will each have differing board compositions as they review their membership, and also as they have volunteer interest. So moving on to expectations. What do we expect these networks to do? At a high level, here are network responsibilities. Represent your members. And I see a chat. Should I pause to take a question? Okay. So represent your members. Understand your member needs and interests as best you can. We have some data. We also expect you to get anecdotal feedback from members, run surveys. Then you put together an engagement plan. So that is meant to represent those members. And you are expected to have target audiences for each of those activities so that, again, you're reaching different populations, sub-communities, if you will, within that membership. Connecting. So you, of course, are trying to connect with your members. And also within those members, that membership, you want to connect those alumni to each other so that they can form their own relationships. And as one of you mentioned, maybe get a job opportunity from that activity or relationship, or find a mentor. You are also helping alumni see themselves in Emory's future. So moving on to that advanced stage, you're both working to advance the network and make sure that what you're working on now helps the viability of the network 3 years from now. And because you're building a pipeline of membership, of volunteers, you're documenting your work, you're raising awareness of the group's existence. And then also you're advancing Emory, because you are encouraging alumni to see themselves in the Emory community, maybe through your network, and maybe in addition to through your network, through other opportunities that Big Emory has for them to remain connected. Here's what a typical board year looks like. So as Jen mentioned, our fiscal year resets on September 1st. So we operate in a school year calendar. We launch a new board cycle. And so networks are launching new annual plans that they've developed over the summer and revisiting their board structures. And then we say it's a fall buzz. It's a busy fall, high volume of activities happening, with welcome to the city events to welcome new grads and transplants to the region, homecoming and reunions. We have 2036 Giving Week happening now, which is a giving challenge supporting Emory students. We have Emory Cares, and we have a big push for the Alumni Admission Network and some other volunteer activities. So it's a major time for engagement, and we can get into that in another conversation, but there's a lot going on in the fall. From a training perspective at the bottom, you will note that in blue, I've listed during each season what we offer from a board training or conference perspective. We will be moving our virtual leadership conference to September moving forward, not this year, but next year, so that we can kick off the year that way. Past few years, we had it in the summer. And now that we're in a different phase of the pandemic, September seems like the right time. So we'll kick off the year with a virtual conference. Then later in the winter, we often see a lot of holiday activities. Boards also might take this time after the busy fall to reassess their annual plans, adjust their budgets if necessary. And then we will offer an external speaker to come in and offer board leadership advice to our volunteers. Moving into March and May, we again see a heavy volume of activity. And again, this is a typical board year for most networks, but in Florida, I know that they do a great deal in January and February because of the weather. So some of this is not true for all networks, but March and May, typically heavy buzz of programming. We have the Emory Day of Giving Philanthropic Challenge. We have Emory Cares again, with the spring version, and again, another push for volunteer activities going into our next season. Every other year, we'll be offering an Emory Leadership Summit on campus, which is a conference that is open to all board members across the university to convene, hear about the university's priorities, meet Emory leaders like President Fenves, and network with each other. So that's an opportunity that is open to alumni who want to come back to campus, and you'll hear more about that from me. And then June and August. Of course, there are summer socials. Many networks do a lot of sporting events, but certainly social events. And it's a time of annual planning. In those 3 months, you are thinking about what the network can achieve in the year ahead, who will be a part of that team, which board members are rolling off, which board members are rolling on, how do people want to adjust their roles and responsibilities, and you're preparing for the fall at the same time. So summer is busy. For individual board members, these are the expectations, because we think of expectations both for the network as a whole and then the individual board member. And for those of you who just joined the board, you saw all of these expectations in the agreement that you committed to. But we need everyone to embrace the mission of what we're doing here. If you're not passionate, you will not be effective or happy in your role. There are 3 forms that you commit to. So you have your board member commitment form, your form that includes what we expect you to do in terms of creating an environment of respect, and then a confidentiality form, because we will share a great deal of alumni data with you. We, of course, expect you to communicate with your staff partner and with fellow board members, and also participate. We don't expect you to be at all activities, not at all. We expect you to be at an activity if you're the one leading it, but we want you to focus on participating in board meetings. And a goal is participating in 75% of board meetings. We realize that in some seasons you'll be less responsive and be able to participate a bit less. But again, it's key that you set expectations with staff about what you are able to contribute to the board so that we can plan accordingly. And stewarding network resources. That is key, that we all remember that Emory is a nonprofit. We are bigger than other nonprofits, but we are a nonprofit and our resources are spread thin. And so we need board members to understand that the funding, which we'll talk about in a moment, is something that we need to be thoughtful about using and making sure we're maximizing that funding to reach as many alumni as possible. And lastly, but certainly not least, we do expect each board member to make a gift to the cause of their choice. That is an entirely different session about the culture of philanthropy at Emory, but we expect all boards from across the university to follow this, ideally 100% board participation. So we are striving for that. The amount does not matter. It is the act of making that gift so that you are sharing that vote of confidence in Emory's future and also helping to set that trend for your peers. And lastly, for this section, our network scorecard. So if we were to think about the health of a network overall, these are the segments within a scorecard that we would be looking at. And I will move forward because I know we are a little behind on time, but again, I go back to environment. Our environment of respect is key. Is the network board cultivating a space where all perspectives are welcome and diversity in all forms is something that they're striving for. We also, of course, are looking at board health overall. Is the board focused? Do they have a plan? Does everyone on the board have specific responsibilities and know how they contribute to that plan and those goals in the year ahead? Are members hearing from the network through regular marketing and communications? Is that network supporting some of Emory's signature initiatives, which does include philanthropy? Is the board effective in reaching members? And is there potential for future growth? There doesn't always have to be, but it's just something when we're evaluating a network that we're looking to see how many more members might be out there. All right, so moving on to member engagement, I will pause there to see if we have any questions. So we talked about, oh, I see one question in the chat. Okay, that's from Alex. Thank you, Alex. All right, so the reason why you're all here, you're here to engage members and make sure that you're connecting alums. These are the main ways that we think about engagement drivers in the region. So wanted to go through them. Some of these are activities that you are a main partner or producer in bringing to life. And some of them are activities that you can use to your advantage in promoting the networks. But it's helpful because if you see these event titles popping up in your area, I don't want you to be taken off guard. And ideally, your staff partner is making you aware of these well in advance too. So 2036 Emory Explores. Hopefully all of you know that we are in the midst of a fundraising campaign. We're actually reaching the end of it, called 2036. And so many of you met President Benvez when he went out into your cities and spoke about 2036. Now we're in the new phase of education where we're out there on the road. Some of you were probably at events earlier this fall in New York and Florida, hearing our best and brightest faculty members talk about their research so that we can illustrate the priorities of 2036. So those events will be in the regions and they are all being recorded. So that content then becomes a podcast that you can also push out to your members to help them understand if they're wondering, what's Emory even doing now? I'm not sure that I align with the university values. Listen to a podcast, see if you like and want to get behind what they're doing. Or if you feel like faculty haven't been to your region in a while, it's great to know about that virtual content that exists. And then we have 2036 Emory in your neighborhood. So these are more casual events where we are also bringing same goal as 2036 Emory Explorers. We're just asking alumni to open up their homes or their clubs or neighborhood locations for more casual faculty talks, so that we can provide a space for alumni who don't want to come out to the big splashy events, and also to get into some neighborhoods that maybe haven't been as accessible to Emory alums.
Mind if I grab the cam so I can take a picture of it?
Oh, Kieran, I think you just need to mute yourself.
Oh, sorry.
No problem. All right, Emory Network events, of course, big drivers of alumni engagement, and we'll get into those in a moment. Regional school events. So the schools look to the regional team to host the majority of programming outside of Atlanta, but the schools also do things from time to time, and they will partner with the regional engagement team. So you will see that now and again. Regional Emory Alumni Association events. So Emory networks are not expected to carry the burden of engagement solely on their shoulders. And I know I'm speaking specifically to the regional networks. I know we have some other networks on the line, but in Chicago, for example, you will see events that are hosted by the Emory Alumni Association in Chicago. And so that's our staff member in Chicago doing something that she would like to do to reach an audience there, in addition to the Emory Chicago network having volunteer-driven activities. So you'll see that balance of staff and volunteer activities. And then we have content and digital programs. So we have an entire professional development learning series. We have great content, again, in the form of podcasts, webinars, you name it. So lots that you can promote to members in addition to the activities that you are hosting. And your staff member, again, can help you find those things and curate the ones that make sense based on your member profile. Okay. So we have these core series, just to wrap up the member engagement section. We think about our regional engagement events mainly in these 4 event series. And we develop these names so that alumni could come to understand that we do offer a balance of activity. It's not just all social events. And also so that they could quickly scan the newsletter and the calendars as we increase the volume of activity, that they could quickly scan the calendars and see, oh, I know what Emory Cares stands for. I'm very much into service events. I'm going to click into that. So just to review them, Emory Cares, when you see that, you know that that experience relates to community service or board preparedness. And plug for Emory Cares. I know many of you are hosting those service projects next week. So we are doing our best to help you out there. Emory in your neighborhood, those are hyper local experiences. So I mentioned that might be us going into a neighborhood where alumni have felt like they had to travel a far distance to Emory events in the past. It could also just be us having a cultural experience or something different that brings an intimate group of people together to explore their city. Emory Explorers, that's all about content. Whether we are featuring alumni, parents, faculty, those events are meant to be discussions that highlight Emory's intellectual capital. Wonderful Wednesdays, those are social events that build upon the student tradition that is growing. We wanted to bring that to the alumni community, and I believe one of our New York volunteers was actually the one who had the great idea to start that tradition in New York, and those are all about fellowship. And so as you can see here, we don't just go to bars for those events. We also head out to the tennis court and do a lot of other fun things, but they are social in nature. There are other ways to engage members. I won't go down this list now, but it isn't just about events. There are surveys you could run. There's alumni storytelling. You can do an alumni spotlight series, and the alums who are featured in the spotlight, that's a volunteer activity for them. And then anyone who clicks on that story on certain platforms, we can count that as an engagement. There are EAA volunteer programs, like Jen mentioned, Dinner with 12 Strangers. You could promote those to members and say, the Veterans Network is going to host this D12 event. So the D12 infrastructure is already in place, and the Veterans Network just needs to find the host, and we will provide the students. So there are many things that your staff partner can help you brainstorm if you're wondering what to do in between events. Resources. How are you all supported in doing all of these things and bringing it to fruition? So an overview of the resources available to Emory Networks. One, you have a staff partner at the Emory Alumni Association, one of the regional engagement team members who I mentioned, and we'll get into that in a moment because staff partners and money, those are the top two probably most asked about resources. So I'm going to double click into those momentarily. Best practices, these will be made available by your staff partner and also fellow network board members, not just from the network you serve on, but we can also share insights with what's happening with networks across the world. Data on alumni or other constituents, because again, you sign that confidentiality form. So we have tons of information. Usually we need help synthesizing it. That's something I know one of our AYA board members who has a lot more skills in Excel than I do is able to analyze our population of Emory alumni under 40 as we make decisions about where to host events and also thinking about some of the other demographics. Insider insights. So we'll be sure to pass on information about Emory's priorities or what the presentation you heard from Jen earlier tonight. We're always happy to provide you with more information so that you understand where Emory's headed. Funding, which we'll get to in a moment. Connections. Your staff partner is working alongside you to help identify volunteers, alumni who can be helpful to the network, whether it's a speaker for an event, someone who could open a door, or a potential board member. And training and conferences. So I mentioned earlier that we have several training and conferences throughout the year. We have scaled back that number a bit. Just we continue to refine that list based on your feedback. So please share your input. We realize you all are busy, so you don't have much time to attend additional trainings, but we will certainly put more on the schedule as requested. So if you tell us that you feel it would be helpful to have an update on how to use Instagram to get more followers for your network, we can put that together. Or if you want to get together with other Emory Cares project leaders, we can facilitate that. So we welcome your feedback. And these are resources, again, I'll send in follow-up that we ask you to bookmark. These are really helpful websites where you can find trainings that have been recorded, forms, information on programs you can promote, etc. All right, so on to the staff partner and budget section of these resources. And then I promise that we will be wrapping up to the more interactive portion of our evening. So the Emory Alumni Association staff partner, we get a lot of questions about this. And so again, I invite you to unmute yourself if you would like to dig in here with a specific example. But your staff partner should be thought of as your partner. Your success is their success. But what they will not be doing is listening to the board design and engagement plan and then be the one to implement it. So it is a partnership in that sense as well. Both the staff partner and the board are building that engagement plan, producing the events within it, identifying volunteer leaders to build the pipeline, sending out marketing and communications. So staff and volunteers are doing things within each of those three core buckets. It's just that there's a division of responsibilities within them. So marketing and communications, for example, we certainly need volunteers to help us manage the social media accounts related to the networks. And we certainly, I think, are much more effective if we have board members weighing in on some of the language that we use when we are advertising an activity so that it's in the voice of the alum. But the staff member can be the one to actually curate the newsletters, get them out, make sure that everything stays on track with the marketing plan, keep you updated on the numbers leading up to an event to let you know, hey, I think we need another email push. So those are ways in which you both play a role in marketing and communications. Venues that came up recently. It is not a black or white. Staff do not help with finding venues for events, or staff find the venues for events. It's both. Staff will absolutely help do research to try and identify event venues, but volunteers should also be doing that research as well if they're the event lead. And we get fantastic information and connections from board members. They often find great venues because they're on the ground thinking about what would be popular in their area, or they've negotiated a great deal. So again, it is a partnership. And it is evaluated on a case-by-case basis as we look at the annual plan and the volunteers and the staff. And so that is a conversation you need to have with your staff partner. But the point is that they are a consultant to guide you in the process of implementing that plan, making sure it's the best it can be based on their knowledge. and also helping you bring that to fruition and helping you stay on track. And I say you, but also your board, helping the board stay on track with the milestones they need to adhere to be successful. So that is their role. And again, they are of course here to represent you with the broader Emory community. Just as you are representing your members, they are also going to represent your feedback as well and connect you to resources as needed. Okay. Any questions about staff partner before I move on? I know that's a big one. Okay. Funding and budgeting. So this is our final section before I turn it over to advice from the board members who have been there. So every network needs a budget. Why? Here are the most common expenses for a network, and I'm sure they will come as no surprise to you. Event venues are creeping up in the post-pandemic world, so those certainly cost a great deal of money. Alcohol and catering are the majority of ways that networks use their funding, but they might also be purchasing tickets to an activity. We encourage boards to get together and have a retreat once a year, and many boards are moving to virtual meetings, but we do hope that at least once a year you'll be together in person and you might get some snacks. If you need specialty items, then you can use your network budget for that. But the Emory Alumni Association will provide Emory swag and basic event supplies, so you don't have to think about those costs. There is a lot more that we could go into, and so I put it here for you to discuss with your staff partner that Emory is tax exempt, so that's something that can help your network budget. And as you think about folks who can provide sponsorship for network events, we can talk to you about getting gift and kind credit for that. So there are some notes here for you to talk to your staff partner about. But here are the funding sources for Emory networks. Emory provides the majority of funding to the networks each year. And this is based on what you put together in your annual plan, your historic spend, the number of members that you plan to engage, and of course your board health, because if a network has been fairly dormant, they only have one volunteer and they want $5,000, we're going to say, is this realistic that you're actually going to spend these funds this year? Alumni hosts. So we do encourage networks, and many networks are able to make their budget stretch by identifying alumni who will open up their homes or office space, because I mentioned venue costs are very high. So alumni who either want to provide space or who actually want to pay for catering at an event or something else, we welcome that. And for certain expenses, we can provide gift and kind credit to those alums so they actually can receive donor credit. And that can be very appealing to some people. So it's a great way to give back. And again, really makes an impact with network budgets. Corporate sponsors. So we do have a corporate relations office that can help open doors for us. Again, if we're looking more for space, then we could approach some corporations to provide space. We just did an event at Truist where they opened up a beautiful conference room for us in Charlotte. Or we might approach someone else who's not one of our top corporate partners and be able to negotiate some sort of event special or discount. I'll also call out the Emory Entrepreneur Network. They've been hosting a speaker series for years at a fantastic law firm in Atlanta that one of our law school board members has made available. It's a win for the law firm. It's a win for the Entrepreneur Network, and that's been a beautiful partnership. And lastly, ticket revenue. So many networks are seeing success with charging even just a minimal ticket price for activities so that they have a better sense of how many people will come out to that network activity. Something to note is that $5 from each ticket purchase. So actually not each ticket purchased, every person who purchases a ticket, and some people might purchase 5 tickets to an event. Every person who purchases a ticket, there will be $5 taken out of the ticket revenue and fed back as a donation to Emory University's General Scholarship Fund. So that is something to note, that starting this year, Emory moved to a new policy saying that we would consider ticket revenue to be also counted as a donation back to the university, because we had thousands of alumni buying tickets for events but not making donations to Emory because they already felt like they were contributing to the university. So we decided to give them credit, and that's something that is, again, an approved standard, but it does mean that a portion of the revenue will not go back to the network. So that's something your staff partner can, again, help you calculate when you're setting up ticket costs. but that ticket revenue goes directly back to the network budget and is able to be used immediately. And finally, the network budget timeline, because we do get many questions about this. So this is always an interesting process, and I appreciate everyone's patience this year because there are times when Emory leadership is still making some adjustments, and so we do not finalize our budget until a little bit after the fiscal year starts. But Emory staff are submitting their budget requests for the fiscal year ahead in the spring of the year prior, and that will keep getting earlier and earlier. So then we are starting annual planning discussions with our networks in the summer. So obviously we submit our budget requests, then we work with y'all on annual plans. So of course, then when we come back to see what our approved budget is, we will move some things around based on the annual planning conversations that we're having with you all. And then early in ideally September, sometimes it's October, we receive final confirmation on our budget and we do our final budget allocations. Again, based on what we're seeing from you all, since some networks are hopeful in June that they're going to do a lot of things. And by September, they're realizing maybe we're going to dial that back a little bit. So change happens and we understand that and we can move money around. And we also understand some great ideas might come up during the year. So we can also try to make more funding available if necessary. It's not always possible, but we do our best to continue to monitor what's happening. Are some people not spending? Are some people overspending? And move things around as necessary. But we try to ask each group to stick to their annual plan as best they can. And then if they need to cancel or reschedule an event, make sure that you talk to your staff partner about how you are going to use that funding from that activity for something else later in the year, because we don't want groups to sit on money and then at the very last minute try to spend thousands of dollars. So that is something, again, your staff partner will be a very close guide through all of this. And we do want in each board meeting to talk about the budget so that everyone knows where they stand. And again, maybe you allocated $500 for an event and it ended up coming in at $300. And so at the next board meeting, you can talk about things you learned and say, here's $200 extra. What do we want to add this on to? I recently had a meeting with the Atlanta Young Alumni Network, and we realized we were doing an event and we really didn't need to be providing the amount of food that we were providing. We felt like we could get everyone to come out and have a good time, and we could slash our catering budget in half. So we're going to try that this year and move that money elsewhere.